Hey everybody, before I start this video, I just want to make a huge disclaimer here. This video is not to criticize the people behind the development of this game. This is just with the pure intentions of journalism work here, trying to advocate for the fair use of the content I found. So I'm not trying to attack anybody personally, not trying to tarnish anyone's reputation. With that said, let's begin. Death Cargo is a very curious case of a game. It is a story that is buried under the sands of time, one that the developers hope it is buried and forgotten, to never see the light of day ever again. But just like the undead, Death Cargo refuses to die and tends to come back from the realm of the underworld in small and short bursts in the brain of those that remember its existence. And today, I am its vessel to communicate to you guys about this obscure game, one that briefly saw the light of day, and due to controversy it was doomed to be killed and buried by its own creator, doomed to repeat the cycle time and time again. Death Cargo was a very ambitious project for an indie studio known as Necrostorm, set on delivering a Mortal Kombat-esque experience, focusing on the classic Mortal Kombat visual style with digitized actors, plus the violent nature that characterized Mortal Kombat. But this aimed to take it a step further, attempting to dethrone the king and take its place. The game was obviously a fighting game, set in a horror, gore, sci-fi ambience. This already started to set it apart from the other games in the genre, where most of the fighting games take place in street fights like Street Fighter, Tekken, Dead or Alive, or set in an Eastern martial arts style like Mortal Kombat. But its main appeal that took things to another level to differentiate it from the Mortal Kombat clones that spawned in the dozens in the 90s was that the finishing moves were in full motion video with real actors and practical effects. I still remember when my brother one day came running to my room on the summer vacations of 2011. As I was playing Mortal Kombat 9, he excitedly told me about this obscure game being developed, set on becoming the new Mortal Kombat. I was completely skeptical about this, only to cause that my brother ended up showing me the finishing move from Leech on Plasma, where Plasma's face was ripped off. These were two characters that appeared on the trailer for the game. And dare I say, it was way more than any of us bargained for. The scene was violent and painful, and the actor, under the masterfully made practical effects, sold the acting as if they were in a lot of pain on their way to a slow but agonizing demise. This trailer depicted a very gruesome scene, but this trailer is maybe, sadly, depending on what you consider worth keeping, lost media. It is impossible to find it nowadays, or at least it was for me when I started to do my research for this video. This project was set on leaving Mortal Kombat to shame, a form of Studing beating the master scenario, and being honest, it wasn't going to be easy for Death Cargo, but at least it had a chance with how unique the game was. And before continuing, a bit of background on the Death Cargo's developer studio, Necrostorm. Necrostorm is an Italian studio that focuses on making highly disturbing indie gore horror movies. I honestly haven't watched any movie from them. I only seen the trailers and scenes they upload to the internet, and for what I've seen, they have a loyal following, which is completely respectable. And now they were venturing into the video game industry. As soon as we saw the few trailers that existed at the moment, my brother and I were intrigued about this title, so we started following the socials of the studio to follow the progress of their craft. The first months to a year, Necrostorm updated the site of Death Cargo fairly regularly, adding a story to the game, more characters than the two already mentioned Leech and Plasma, each of them with a backstory of who or what they were, and a killer soundtrack to match the sci-fi vibe. I mean, just listen to this. Doesn't this get you hyped? And after some back and forth between the slowly growing fanbase and the company, Necrostorm went completely silent on Death Cargo. They would still add new trailers or posters for movies, but Death Cargo was nowhere to be seen. Only a few items on the page were being added, like changes to a technical info, wallpapers, or some story stuff. A lot of us began to theorize that the project was simply cancelled. Maybe the studio couldn't afford the development cost based solely on their splatter movies income. That, or the game was stuck on development hell, and who knows which of the two is worse for the final outcome. And to all this, you might be wondering, what was all the fuss with Death Cargo? What was so alluring for our minds back in 2011-2012? Well, for me, it was first of all the very defiant premise. A David versus Goliath story. An underdog like Little Mac taking on giants and reaching the top. The possibility of a success story where the odds are stacked against the little guy. Something and someone to root for. And see it all happened from the beginning. Second, it was the setting. I am a sucker for sci-fi, especially horror sci-fi. Third, it was the unique ideas the game presented, like high-definition digitized actors with full-motion video finishers, a smooth animation for characters' moves, and cool feedback on the gameplay like the sounds or the camera slightly shaking when you hit your opponent. Fourth, an interesting premise for the story. The story is about a Death Cargo coming from planet Sonodar. That is pretty much a giant weapons factory sold to factions in intergalactic wars. The peculiar thing about these weapons, or more like bioweapons if we need to categorize them, is that they are sentient weapons, organic entities smart enough to carry their duties diligently and intelligently, ranging from anthropomorphic atrocities with superb strength and endurance, organic tools designed to be used as aid in combat, unmatching any regular tool anyone in the galaxy could call a weapon, shape-shifting creatures designed for more stealthy approaches or even luring targets to their demise, or even creatures that take over organic creatures functioning as hosts to parasites. Those bioweapons were our playable characters, and we had an interesting roster that we'll talk about further in the video. The Death Cargos are just vessels that transport the requested weapons to the planets. These cargos don't have a crew, only a commander, which is an organic war machine designed to deliver and protect the cargo. One of these cargos has a malfunction on the engine and has to make an emergency landing on Earth in the year 2067. Due to emergency protocols, the cargo is ejected out of the ship and scattered over the planet. The commander of said cargo, named Squalo, goes silent, but their vitals show that they are still alive. So another commander of a Death Cargo named Plasma is sent to find the weapons that are now active and tries to return them to their Death Cargo and find out what happened to Squalo and why there is so much mystery around this event. So we mentioned the two commanders, Plasma and Squalo. I guess it's fair to mention characters, but before I proceed, all the information I'm going to say is pretty much from my memory, since a lot of the information from this game is completely lost, which is a topic that I'll cover further down the line. The protagonist of the story is Plasma, the new commander sent to retrieve the weapon and find out about their mentor, Squalo. Plasma is an organic war machine, with strength and speed that surpasses any human being, and can easily beat entire armies on their own. Now, a cool detail for Plasma, as pretty much any other character in the game except one or two, is that they don't have a biological sex. Now, in today's internet, that would be labeled as woke and hated by a lot of brain-dead people. But the more you think about it, it is actually a neat detail that Plasma is genderless and has no biological sex. Since they are a Death Cargo commander, they have only two jobs: deliver the weapons and protect the cargo from any harm. Anything that might distract them from their job can cause a catastrophe of planetary scale at minimum, which not only threatens the life of countless entities in the galaxy, but also harms the profits of planet Sonodar. So yeah, for me, having what we would call a non-binary character in this case was an excellent detail in my humble opinion. Squalo is the antagonist of the game. They were Plasma superior at some point, and if I remember correctly, their mentor. But now, for some reason, Squalo has gone rogue and seemingly they were behind the ship's malfunction. And for reasons unknown to Plasma or anyone in Zonader, they activated the weapons from the cargo. Leech is just a long-haired Hulk. Okay. Truth is, I don't remember Leech's bio, but it wasn't interesting as far as I can remember. So yeah, a long-haired Hulk. Arachno is a shape-shifting quasi-arachnid weapon that lures their victims to a secluded space where it can eliminate them. In Earth, it takes the shape of an attractive young woman to fulfill its job. But once it lures you in, the shape of the beautiful young lady starts to change. Long and numerous ungular extremities protrude from the back, and a viscously acidic web-like substance starts to pour out of her body, quickly entangling you into an acidic cocoon that slowly consumes you. Nova, she's a Japanese Gyaru schoolgirl. Fine. I think I remember she was the CEO of a powerful company in Japan and came across a host-like or tool-like cargo that grants her superpowers. But honestly, I can't remember if what I'm saying is completely true. Agent Malcolm, an FBI agent that came across a tool-like cargo weapon, a slug-like creature. This weapon was seemingly inactive when the agent came across it, but as soon as he touched the creature, it took the shape of an instrument any agent would know how to use, a revolver. But the nozzle is a mouth. This weapon, whose name I can't remember, has recognized Agent Malcolm's as its primary user. This means it won't attack him in use mode, but feeding mode is a whole nother story. This weapon must feed unorganic beings to keep working, and it must be fed every once in a while. It can even feed from the primary user, but the Agent Malcolm is safe if he knows that the weapon can't jump. So he only needs to be in a high enough area so that the weapon looks for another poor bastard lucky enough to be considered food. And once it feeds, the weapon will come back to its primary user, to be used once again. Silent. I can't remember a lot from Silent, but I think it was a parasitic weapon that it took over a Russian prisoner's corpse in a jail, turning the host extremely aggressive like a zombie. Morbo is another parasitic weapon, but this one was more like a mist-like creature that gets into your body, destroys whatever is inside you, and uses your skin as a puppet. Damaging the host or husk, if you prefer calling it like that, won't necessarily damage Morbo, and getting it in proximity can only end up in becoming its next host. Currently, it is a poor mine worker in Ultra New Mexico, which is a city in this universe. Crystal. I can't remember a damn thing from this character. I think it was some rogue commander like Squalo, I don't know. Toxic. A meth lab worker. I think his name was Miguel. I'm not kidding. I think Toxic's name was Miguel before coming in contact with the weapon. Or maybe Miguel was Morbo's host? I honestly don't remember about this character a lot. Protein X is just a Krang's ripoff. You know Krang from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? It's him! But in all seriously, this character is just as a parasitic form that fuses with the host, but for some reason it's inside. The thing must be extremely strong or powerful for exposing itself like that. AMAZ1NG, or amazing if you will. It's just a hot lady in underwear with a pointy ear helmet. Nothing more to add. I don't remember it actually having a lot of info on the website 14 years ago, and if it did, it must have been generic because I can't remember a thing. By the way, if you're wondering where I got the drawings for the characters on this video, is thanks to the user ICCube that uploaded them on an old forum. Otherwise, you would have to conform with the miniatures in the only character screen I could find. So with all this mentioned, I think Death Cargo was worth waiting for and back up the efforts of a small Italian team, so that we could play it and see a new IP climbing in the ranks of the fighting games. But that never happened. 2012 and 2013 came and went, and no news from Death Cargo's release. Then, out of the blue, Necrostorm breaks the silence, and it gives the news. Death Cargo will release in March 2014, and all the people that bought a physical copy will be getting it that day. The digital release was going to release a few days later. The day arrived, and there was no info online on Death Cargo besides Necrostorm's news. But no one was uploading videos nor screenshots of the game. And soon, the forums started to speculate that this was all indeed a scam and that the game never existed. People started to question Necrostorm on their socials about the lack of evidence that the game was real. Necrostorm in the beginning started to say that there could be no videos until the release trailer was uploaded, due to air quotes, some Italian laws that forbid that. Soon enough, people started investigating said law, and it had nothing to do with video games or online media at all, reinforcing the idea that the game was in fact a scam. Necrostorm announces that the trailer will release on May 5th, 2014, and then people could upload the videos and cool stuff online about Death Cargo. And once May 5th rolls in, Necrostorm stays silent. There was no trailer. People started to organize, and on forums people were buying the copy, but the process to get it was convoluted. You would receive an .exe file, and once you open it, it shows a congrats screen, and in it, it gave you an email address for customer support for Necrostorm, who you had to contact, and then they will contact you back in 12 to 48 hours to give you a digital key to get the game. People claimed that they never got the key, but got contacted by Necrostorm, saying that they traced their email to online haters and they wouldn't give them the game, but they would refund the $35 they've paid for it. It seems that when it all began to unfold, Necrostorm started to blacklist users. They even blocked people that dared to even ask anything on social media. I remember being in my college years and watching this all unfold in front of my very own eyes. The fire spreading everywhere. People on forums got in contact with Kotaku, and Kotaku actually wrote an article about the situation on May 9th, 2014, which everyone could agree that it felt like it was a scam, but something was off. You see, for a scam to be a scam, there would have to be a loss of money from a buyer, like with Mictlan Ancient Mythical Tale, where the creator went radio silent from one day to another after receiving backlash for one attempt to incorporate NFTs, and the people that gave them money never saw anything in return, including the content creators that gave their time and likeness for the project they believed in. But Necrostorm was refunding the blacklisted users, or those that complained at least. Necrostorm wasn't keeping the money. And then, on May 10th, 2014, Necrostorm announces that the trailer will drop on Monday 12th of May 2014. And I can't recall if it did exactly on the day that it promised, but they did in the span of the week. And on the Test Your Might forum on May 19th, 2014, it is confirmed that the game is real. But this was only the beginning. Now, for the sake of the events, as I remember them, I'll explain what happened in the following weeks. The trailer drops, and I don't remember anything from it, but only that it was extremely boring. And the game released as expected, and it was bad. Not only bad, it was horrible to even look at. I don't want to imagine what even felt playing it. The only well-animated character was Plasma. The rest moved stiffly, jumped awkwardly, and the visual effects from their moveset looked poorly made with After Effects. People started to complain now how bad the game it was. It was filled with bugs, it was horrible. The gameplay was boring, it was uninteresting, and it had very poorly made backgrounds and foregrounds. The characters were poorly digitized around the 90% of the roster. The death rips were a very poor CGI effect display and not at all like the original trailers depicted, with awesome practical effects. There were new finisher moves called life rips that happen when you perform any special move on your opponent, but they looked off. Pretty much everything ended becoming a flesh sack twice the size of the character. Gameplay channels like the Super Best Friends Play played the game and roasted it like there was no tomorrow, but I think that specific case was further down the line. But on forums, people were pondering if it was preferable that the game never released at all. Death Cargo was being flamed from every direction, and on June 7th, 2014, Necrostorm, on their official Facebook page, released a statement, and I could not believe what I was reading. It pretty much said that the whole thing was a 4D chess move from the president of Necrostorm, and all of us were played. We were playing their game and we were unaware of it. And now that post can no longer be found on the official socials of Necrostorm. But after days of scouring the web for any hint, I found it. It's not a screenshot from the Facebook post, but the text is there, so take it with a grain of salt. In here, it describes that it was all a weird marketing strategy. By causing outrage, they implemented it on a movie they made and the sales number went up to 300%. So they wanted to go for the big leagues with video games, go worldwide. So they made Death Cargo, released only a few gameplay videos and betas and then fully stopped. They contacted movie fans that bought the game and made a deal so that the fans wouldn't upload anything, delayed the trailer to increase the outrage, and denied the purchase to the haters and refunded them with their purchase. And once Kotaku wrote about them, then it blew up. They started to threaten people with legal action only to hype up the game even more. And in the end, it seemingly worked for them. They got a considerable amount of money thanks to this very well crafted campaign. Something worth going to the history books, I might say. Some people were skeptical of this announcement since it was in the long run more damaging to their image, since the people wouldn't trust any further projects, so it seemed like a dumb idea to tarnish your own image worldwide for a few $1,000s. What did I personally think of it? Well, I'm not sure. It makes sense that it was planned to do this all along based solely on the fact that they refunded people that were complaining, since it is extremely rare to have a company refund a game so easily. Sometimes even legal action must be taken into account before a gaming company actually makes refunds available to the buyers. But at the same time, I wouldn't think any sane person would do that horrible PR move and would admit it openly. To basically said, hey, bad press is still press. Part of me believes that some people speculated that it was indeed a troll. But what I think personally is that they were met with a wall and they didn't know how to proceed, so they ended up causing outrage. They found out that developing a video game it's hard and it costs a lot of money. And in the end, they decided to cut their losses, make an outrage, and get money. But here is where things get even more dicey. A year later after the release, in June 2015, two things happened. First, any Death Cargo related thing online was taken down. Any video, any screenshot, any forum, any posts, anything. Necrostorm wanted Death Cargo to be dead and forgotten. And second, they announced a new game via a social media post. The post did a few number of things. It clarified that due to budget constraints they couldn't develop the game they dreamed of, but nonetheless they were proud of trying. And here I can't blame them. Trying is actually important. Also, they admitted that the air quotes scam campaign was real. They actually were behind it all, and it worked so well for them that it allowed them to work on the vision of what Death Cargo should have been. So then, they announced that they would overhaul Death Cargo to a new game called Gorebreaker. And the game would release by the end of that year in 2015, almost 11 years ago. Now, I won't speak about Gorebreaker since it's not the topic, but I'll only mention that the game is still in development under crowdfunding at the moment as I'm recording this, in 2026, 11 years later. and at least one console generation has passed since the game supposedly was tested and approved to release on Xbox One. Death Cargo's story is a wild one. It started as a hope to bring new light to fighting games, especially mature fighting games, which technically only Mortal Kombat exists as a big name in the media, only to end up as a bad product with zero transparency and tarnishing the name of Necrostorm to what gaming is related to. I can say that personally, after Death Cargo's horrible management from the studio, I wouldn't trust them to make a good quality game and wouldn't buy a game of theirs unless proven otherwise. But I can actually congratulate them for trying. Making a video game ain't easy, much less if the development costs come straight out of your own pocket, and if you still have other projects to focus on to keep on funding your own game. It's something that, even though I don't like saying it, I consider that it's actually worth congratulating them for. And in the movie side, all I see is praise, and honestly, even if I'm not a gore fan, I can see why people like their films. They are very well made with very good practical effects. That's why the early trailers for the finishing moves looked so good. They are masters in the film and practical effects craft. But again, on a personal level, like I said, the door is almost closed for me to any Necrostorm related games, because I don't trust their judgment on video games. But I give them the benefit of the doubt because I believe in second chances, and I want to actually believe they actually want to make a good game. And I think they have a very creative idea with the Death Cargo Gorebreaker universe. And I can only hope that they will make a killer soundtrack again if Gorebreaker eventually sees the light of day. Now, as a final remark, it was actually really hard to find anything related to the game. Like, really hard. I actually jumped from my seat and screamed with emotion when I found the transcript for the Facebook post, and I want to formally apologize to my cat whom I woke up, and to my wife who thought I had burned my mouth with the pizza slice she brought to me while researching all of this. Necrostorm actually wanted to keep all of this buried. I could find very little info on the website and even less on gameplay videos. One of the videos you can find on YouTube is I think a review from Famitsu, which is the #1 game magazine in Japan, I believe. So yeah, some could get away with it. So in the end, also, I want to thank everybody that left their print about this game online. Without you, I couldn't have found any evidence of this game even existing, even though it was a long search on the internet that went from very small clues to other small clues to find anything, even a small screenshot of material of the original site or the game even existing. This sure does bring the topic of the importance of game preservation, because like it or not, Death Cargo became a legend in online forums in the previous decade, and it could be seen like a warning sign or a cautionary tale on video game development, especially from small studios. Hey everyone, Editing Dorgeek here. As I was editing the video, I continued doing some small research and came across some amount of information. Even got to contact with the beta tester who shared their story with me, how they got blacklisted and the emails that Necrostorm sent, to the point that even threatening them with legal action, and actually got a bit more footage of the game, like the beta and finished product, mostly soundtrack and pictures from the characters, at least the 6 characters that made it to the final product. The DLC characters seemed to be completely lost. There was no way I could come across them as much as I tried to find them. I guess they are actually true lost media. But like the executioner tends to say, let's start from the top. First, I want to give a huge shout out to the beta tester I contacted that gave me all this info. I prefer to keep their username a secret since it seems they had quite a history of issues with Necrostorm, and I don't want to cause them any trouble for this. So for the screenshots, I'll censor the name because one of the emails this person got from Necrostorm shows their real name, and again, I wouldn't want to cause this person to go through the hassle of dealing with Necrostorm's supposed legal team's threats again. So it seems that this person was a beta tester of the years of yore of Death Cargo, back when Necrostorm solicited people for the free beta. This person seemingly participated on the beta and gave them feedback on the game. This feedback included things like not being able to jump over the opponent, and this I remember from a video from a beta tester from Spain that I saw a long time ago, so I can confirm that issue. Or when both players choose the same character. There weren't alternate colors for the outfits to distinguish who was who. And this is still in the final product, by the way. This and other weird stuff this person mentions like bugs were present back then, and seemingly Necrostorm was okay with it, claiming it was on purpose. Those bad features were there. So after the beta testers gave their advice on it, this person and seemingly other two named people amongst the other players from the Mortal Kombat scene back in the day got blacklisted. And they only found this out when attempting to purchase the game. So all this shady behavior on the beta testing didn't go unnoticed for several members of forums, and they started to ask questions about Death Cargo's existence and or quality. And the studio sent emails to the people that created the threads online, threatening them with legal action for supposed defamation. And for as much as the forum users were flaming Death Cargo, they didn't seem to state facts as true. They were still speculations. And if a product is bad or you consider it to be bad, it's still your perception. It's not precisely a fact. So, in my opinion, Necrostorm was acting in a very unprofessional behavior, because they pretty much accused these forum users as, and I quote, adults who have nothing to do but pour their frustrations towards those who are evidently more successful than them. And some forum threads were actually closed by Necrostorm. And not only threads, online posts in general, or pretty much every YouTube video that had Death Cargo in it claiming copyright. Which, technically speaking, they can do it. But it is still a very weird behavior in the end of it all. So, in the end, this person attempted to buy the game and got an email that said the email was linked to the banned forum users, and in the message it says, and I quote, "We don't accept money from people that call us air quote cheaters and our game a air quote fraud. Do you want to play it now? We are sorry. We don't need your money. Have a nice day." Damn, speaking about pettiness. So after all the interaction and seeing all this evidence from the emails and the history Necrostorm has with its haters, all I can say is that I feel bad for what Death Cargo could have been. The legacy it could have left us in the gaming history. I think we all long for what Death Cargo could have been in the end. I mean, just think about it for a second. If, and only if, Death Cargo would have felt a bit better in the gameplay department. Because as I got into my research and what I could see firsthand, all I can say is that they had a very promising features. Like I already mentioned, the aesthetic, the banger of a soundtrack, certain feedbacks like shaky cam when hits connect, certain characters like Plasma and Leech actually having a cool smooth animation and visual effects, the story and character backgrounds, all the lore surrounding the story, the full motion video finishers, and so much, much more. I think it really had potential, and like my brother said a few days ago when I brought up the topic speaking with him, he said, if they would have focused on making the gameplay a bit more fluent, digitize the rest of the characters better, keep the finishers as practical effects with minimum CGI, maybe, just maybe, right now, we would have the third entry of Death Cargo in 2026. They would have had a legacy. And personally, I agree. Death Cargo could have spawned their own genre like Demon's Souls did with Souls-likes, which let me remind you, Demon's Souls wasn't a big hit when it came out, but it sparked the match for what Souls-likes are nowadays, its own genre in gaming. Now imagine what Death Cargo could have made. Maybe not dethrone Mortal Kombat, but spawn its own current of gaming, like Cargo-like games, fighting games with digitized actors and full motion video finishers. And one can only dream of the possibilities. Now, as my final remark in this kinda long parenthesis that gave me extra work, I again can only commend Necrostorm, by even just trying to get out of their comfort zone with gaming, and applying their expertise with practical effects to parts of the gameplay. And like I said, I don't hold my breath with Gorebreaker, but if they would ask me what do I hope for, I hope it is exactly what they promise, and if possible, a bit more. Because, like I said, they have the potential, and their know-how could actually inspire new generations of game devs to follow in their footsteps and put their name in gaming's history, but right now as a huge success. I can only tell Necrostorm to keep on trying, to keep on pursuing an artistic goal and not letting go. No matter how hard it gets or if they need to take breaks from time to time, I would ask them to fulfill their vision of what they wanted this game to be in its ideation stages. And without anything else to add, hope you have a great day. This has been Dorgig speaking to you. And I don't know if I want to make this joke, if not I'll have to remove it, but stay necro and wait till the storm comes. Stay safe, bye bye.